Hey everyone, welcome to CR Sunday Conversations. Yes. We got more ladies this week. We got Zoe, soon to be Fowler. Is that okay to say?
Yeah. Heck
yeah. Oh my gosh. Start cheering.
Exciting.
It's nice to have an audience. Usually there'd be a couple cheers,
great.
at least one maybe.
We'll
cheer for you. Give the shout out.
Thank you.
And we got Steph Minso over there.
Steph.
And then obviously Yasmin's here with us again.
Hello.
This is going to be fun. Honestly, guys, we're going into a two-part series kind of within the Hallelujah Lassies. We're going this week, next week. We're talking about one thing, different lives of different women, Harriet Tubman and Corrie Ten Boom. If you're Dutch, Corrie Ten Boom.
Yes.
If you're English, if you're American, it's Corrie Ten Boom. I got made fun of in the Netherlands when I said Corrie Ten Boom, so I have to say it.
Funny.
My conscience does not allow me to say it otherwise. But that's who we're talking. If you don't know those two ladies, first off, they're going to explain who they are, but you have to go and read more about their lives. Yes. We were just talking about this. These are some of my favorite subjects. And by the way, guys, if you ever hear, there's construction going on behind us.
Bless them.
The backside of the office here. So if you hear that, just forgive them. They're blessed over there.
They are.
Constructing whatever they're constructing. But this week we were just talking about this. I love these subjects. I loved our last two subjects, last people we've talked about. But this is like Christian superheroes now. It's like the type of stories that you're like, oh my gosh. I'm just like reading my Bible and like preaching and I think I'm cool, but then these people over here, like no wonder they get written about in human history and no one knows who I am. There's nothing for me to be known about. These guys did crazy stuff. So we're going to talk about them in a second. And specifically our subject is sacrificial love. And I want to read a couple Bible verses. I'm going to pass it to Yasmin here, but this is Matthew 5, verse 43. You got to remember, love in the New Testament is totally different than what you think of emotional, sentimental love. This type of love is gritty. It's biblical, Jesus-like love. It's gritty. It's costly. There's weight to it. And I want to read you this. Matthew 5, verse 43. Thank you, Hammer. We're going to hammer the word of the Lord. Thank you back there.
They're just helping.
Matthew 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Wow. You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Think about that for a second. When we think of love, it's obvious. Like I can sit here and say to Yasmin, I brought you coffee, and she can say that's a loving thing. But Jesus is, when he talks about love, it almost is always in reference to doing something costly. And what is more costly than loving your enemies? Come on. I mean, think about that. When you want to be a son of your Father, we always talk about sonship, daughtership. Just rest in the Lord right now. What Jesus says about being a son of a daughter is that you would love your enemies. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We always think about that holiness. I want holiness. I know Steph wants more holiness in her life. We all do. But Jesus is talking about being perfect is in reference to loving your enemies. We're going to talk about that kind of love today. We know love for friends is also good. John 15:13. You should have this sense in which you love your friends. Jesus says that in John 15:13. No greater love than the one who lays down his life for his friends. We're going to talk about these, but my whole point is there's a cost. It's not like those who are loving bring Starbucks. It's those who are loving lay down their lives. That's different. That's different than most of what we hear in Western Christianity. And so this is the brave love alley right here. This is like throwing a fastball to Yasmin, and she's got the brave love bat in her hands. These ladies have the brave love bat in their hands.
Come on, so fun.
This is going to be fun today, guys. So Yas, would you take us away a little bit more?
This is super good. Well, we're so excited to ask you both questions because you've both done a deep dive into these women's lives. But really, again, we're talking about Corrie Ten Boom and Harriet Tubman, who really, the reason we're doing this, again, we don't just want a good session, find out some cool facts. We really want an impartation from these women's lives, because everything Derek's saying is so true. It is the very core of who Jesus is, and is the core to being a Christian. So I also just want to read this scripture real quick as we dive in, because it's so much more than just hearing a cool story. It's about saying, God, you have put me in this generation right now to make a change, to see souls saved, to see history changed for your kingdom. similar to how these two ladies gave their entire lives to see souls saved and history changed.
Yeah.
So in a similar way, we want to enter into this story and say that's the call on my life. And it's going to look different, but my life is called to imitate theirs in some way because they were both ultimately so led by Jesus. So I just want to read this out as well. It's 2 Corinthians 5:14. So good. And it says, for Christ's love compels us because we are convinced that one died for all and therefore all died. And I'll keep reading in a second, but that alone to say, no, I am utterly compelled by love because he died. He gave everything. And because of that, I'm going to die as well. And it says in 15, and he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. So from now on, I love this part. It's like a little bonus to it. It says, we regard no one from a worldly point of view, though once we regarded Christ in that way, we do so no longer. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. And I just want to park on that because really we're saying, God, I let go of selfish, self-centeredness, a life for myself. That is the old creation. But Jesus, I see that you've died for me, so I'm going to die as well and live fully compelled by love. Come on. So I'm just stoked to hear more about these ladies. So we've got Corrie Ten Boom with Zoe. Would you tell us a little bit more about her life? What struck you about it?
Yes, of course. So Corrie Ten Boom is so significant when we think of sacrificial love. Her life is seriously, when Derek says superhero, like superhero worthy. She grew up in, at that time, Holland, and it was during the time period of World War II. And whenever Holland became occupied by Germany, by the Nazis, her family actually, the crazy thing about it is, obviously we know the Jewish people are persecuted in the time of World War II. Her family studied the value of Jewish people for their entire lives. Like the value of Jewish people as God's chosen people. So naturally, at least to them, when Jewish people began being persecuted, they said, wait a second, we see the value of their lives. We need to protect them. So as a family, the Ten Boom family decided to shelter Jews in their homes for months at a time, even to the point of building a room in their house called the Angel's Den that was completely invisible to anyone in the outside world. To shelter these people and protect them. Now, the crazy thing about the Ten Booms is they decided that no matter the cost, the lives of those in their homes were more valuable than their own lives. So in many stories that we talk about during World War II, there were raids all the time of people's homes. So when the Ten Boom home was raided, the Nazi police officers knew that there were Jewish people inside the home, but because of the room, they could not locate them. Now, the Ten Booms had a choice. They could choose either we reveal where the Jewish people are being hidden, or we as a family, Casper Ten Boom, the father, Corrie Ten Boom, the daughter, and Betsy Ten Boom, the second daughter, go to a concentration camp, potentially be tortured and killed. And the Ten Booms, as a family, decided we will be going to the concentration camps. Seriously, this is the wild thing. When they were in the police station being asked, they wanted to release Casper Ten Boom because he was an old man and they didn't want to have to send him to a concentration camp. And they said, all you have to do is say, I will not harbor any more Jews. And he said, I will harbor more Jews. You cannot release me. If that's what I have to say, do not release me. So as a family, they go to first a prison, then a work camp, then ultimately a death camp. In the work camp, Casper Ten Boom dies. In the death camp, Betsy Ten Boom dies. The remaining Ten Boom is Corrie Ten Boom. She survives, is miraculously released. The camp is called Ravensbrück. I'm sure we've heard about it if you've studied the Holocaust. It's notorious, infamous, all the words. She is released miraculously, and she preaches one message for the rest of her life. After years of interrogation, torture, being said, where are the Jews? She never tells them. After years, she preaches one message, the message of radical forgiveness for the rest of her life. Forgiveness for your enemies, and ultimately the forgiveness of Christ, the gospel. right?
Gosh.
She holds so many people's salvation because of her message of forgiveness. She is so wild. And the crazy thing about Corrie Ten Boom, I always have to mention it. In all of the concentration camps during World War II, she was thought of as one of the most dangerous prisoners.
Gosh.
She was a single woman in her 40s, never violent, never rebellious, yet in history thought of as one of the most dangerous prisoners they ever had.
Wow.
Gosh, how crazy.
What?
And that's just because she's literally, like, she's keeping the information and she's leading movement because people are meeting God and being ministered to in that way. Wow,
it's
that
crazy.
is so wild.
She's not dangerous in the way we would think dangerous, like leading an uprising, trying to escape. No, she's dangerous because she held onto the secrets of the underground, where Jewish people were being given food hidden for years and never revealed any secrets. That's why she was dangerous.
Wow.
Crazy.
So wild.
Crazy.
So wild. And then I know in her life too, we've been talking before, but that God did miracles. Like you're saying, she was miraculously freed, but also that there's a crazy story about a Bible and other people not being searched too. It just seems like God was constantly looking out for her because she chose to live by the principles of God above everything else. And then would you tell us just a little bit about once she got freed as well, what did she do? I mean, she's lost her sister, she's lost her dad, her nation is torn apart. I mean, you think about what would you do at that point? Probably just find somewhere else, like a country far away, to just recover. But what does she decide to do?
So the story of the Bible, real quick. She's in the Ravensbrück death camp. Every woman is searched, like completely searched inside their clothing and outside their clothing to see if they're harboring anything. Corrie decides it's worth it to risk keeping her sister's sweater, who is dying, and her Bible. And she says, well, I'm either going to be searched and they're going to take these things from me, or the Lord is going to do a miracle right now. And as she's waiting to be searched, every woman except her is searched in front of her. The guard immediately walks past her as if she's not even there and searches the next woman. She keeps her sister's sweater and her Bible. She's the only one in the entire camp with personal belongings.
Gosh.
Crazy.
So wild.
So that's that story. Gotta mention it. But after Corrie is released, she creates asylum houses for persecuted Jews, and actually creates asylum houses for now, after the war, persecuted Nazi sympathizers.
Wow.
She creates houses for them to live, both of them. She is so wild. And honestly, the most notable thing is her relationship with her sister. Her sister died saying this. Her name is Betsy Ten Boom, and she died saying this, and I have to find it because it's so powerful. She died saying this. She basically said, we must tell them, Corrie. We must tell them there is no pit so deep that God's love cannot reach it. As she's dying of starvation and exhaustion, she's speaking this message. And so Corrie, after she's released, takes that message and tells the whole world, we have to tell them, we must tell them there's no pit so deep that God's love cannot reach it. That's how she spends the rest of her life, telling people that message.
Crazy. So
crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
She's a wild woman.
So powerful. And again, I'm totally undone by her life, and we're going to move to asking some questions about Harriet Tubman as well, and we'll kind of go back and forth on digging forward in this. But just again to say, this is an ordinary woman. I think, was she like a clockmaker or?
Yeah, she was a watchmaker.
She was a watchmaker. But she was inserted into this time of history that required extraordinary Christ-centered love, and she was willing to respond in that way. I'm just so moved. Thank you so much. So
crazy.
Okay, now we want to pitch it also to Steph for Harriet Tubman. Of course, Harriet was a slave at the time, and there was even this whole thing of her mom was actually technically supposed to be free, so she was technically supposed to be free. And I think even as a young girl, that concept of how wrong slavery was and the corruption of it all really like took hold in her.
Totally.
She, her family, and I know you'll share more about this. Her family, they were actually Methodists in the 1800s, so really the immediate like fruit from the lives of the circuit riders and the movement of the circuit riders, which is crazy.
Which is wild.
She had a relationship with God. She was led by God in a lot of what she did, freed so many slaves, and then later actually fought in the Civil War and saw another 700 slaves freed. So wild, and lived this life of self-sacrifice, sacrificial love. So would you tell us more about her life and just what struck you?
Oh my goodness, Harriet Tubman. I mean, I grew up thinking of her as a total hero. And so it was amazing to be able to do a fresh dive into her life and to see even more of how she was moved, compelled by love, and compelled by the love of God specifically into everything that she did. She was born a slave on a plantation in Maryland. There were 9 siblings, 9 of them total. 3 of her older siblings, all girls, were sold south. And that moment, that's so traumatizing as a family to have some of your children or your siblings literally moved away from you, and you know you will never see them again. And it happened all the time throughout the time of slavery in America. But for her family, what it did was it gave this commitment and enduring just faith that whatever it took, their family would stay together and they would fight for each other. And her parents, as you mentioned, had a radical love for the Lord. Her dad, Ben, was known as a man of prayer. He would sometimes take a knee in the field and just pray. And they also were marked by integrity. And yet in that place of integrity and faithfulness to the tasks that were put before them, even in the midst of all the brutality, they never had broken spirits. And I think that's what's so powerful, is that Harriet never got to a point where she resigned herself to, this is just my life, might as well just accept it and do the best that I can. She just knew from a young age, like, one day I'm going to follow that North Star to freedom. And she just was committed to it. And so actually when one of her fellow slaves, his name was Jim, decides to make a run for it, and the overseer chases after him without even thinking it, she just takes off running. And because she was so strong, because she had to work crazy hard labor in the fields, she had to work the same type of labor as men, and she's a teenager.
I believe she was 14.
She was like 14. She had to plow oxen, like just doing crazy things. She was fit, she was fast, and so it actually enabled her to do everything that she ended up doing later, the hard labor that she worked under. But she takes off running after Jim, and she cuts in just as the overseer's about to get him, and she pretends like she's going to help the overseer take him, and then she releases him and says, go, don't stop. And the overseer gets so mad, he takes like a 2-pound weight and throws it to try and stop Jim from running, but instead it hits her in the head, and it cracks her skull. And you would think that would stop her. She ended up having crazy seizures for most of her life. She would just randomly fall asleep. She'd just be sitting, or she'd be working, she'd fall asleep. And she would get splitting headaches all the time. But instead, like, she was so resilient and so committed that she was like, no, like, nothing's gonna stop me. And the next opportunity, she connected with a Quaker woman. There's a denomination called the Quakers, and they were fierce abolitionists. And this Quaker woman actually approached her as she's working in the field one day and says, if you ever need help, this is my address. Like, this is my house. And so there was one day she knew that she was about to be sold south. And she's like, either I go for it now, or I don't have an opportunity. And she risked it and went for the woman's house, and she ends up taking the Underground Railroad to freedom in Pennsylvania. And then she could have just stayed happy, living her life. But she knew that there is no enjoyment of freedom if you are willfully ignoring the plight of other people. And she knew that her whole family was in bondage. And she knew that there was an entire people group in bondage, even people that she didn't know. And she was like, I will not stop until there is an abolition of this scourge that's on the nation, that it was a sin against God to hold other people in captivity. And that she had to do whatever it took. And as you mentioned, she ended up fighting in the Union Army. She was the first female, the first female leader of an assault. She led a raid that led to the liberation of 756 slaves from all these plantations in South Carolina. She was a scout and a spy for the Union Army because she knew the terrain so well from having led the Underground Railroad. And she was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, meaning she led people to freedom, both in the North and then eventually into Canada for 8 years. And get this, she never lost a passenger. And she brought her entire family, including her 70-year-old parents, to freedom in Canada. And then at the end of her life, she's not done. She's like, there are people that are dying, they're sick, there are people that don't have skills. So she opened up her home, and anyone that needed help, like slaves that were learning new skills or just needed a place to live, or people that were poor and destitute, she opened up her home, and it became like the Harriet Tubman home. And people could live there and be provided for. until the day she
Oh
died.
my gosh.
That is so powerful.
That is so crazy. I always like, sometimes when you meet people and they kind of spout off like a couple cool things about them, I always wonder, like, what would it be like to meet Harriet Tubman? Where would she even start?
Oh my goodness.
Do you know what I mean?
It is
like,
remarkable.
It's unending.
Her life is crazy. It's like she lived 10 different lives. She was just so committed.
Wow.
Just never
That's
stopped.
amazing. Wow, I'm so wrecked right now.
So
and even listening to both of these women's lives, a few things are sticking out to me, and then definitely want to go to just the next question. But one thing that is so remarkable in both of these women's lives is the role of their parents beforehand.
I was thinking that too.
And
Crazy.
the faith and the resilience of both of their fathers in these situations to say, we will stand for what we'll stand for, even in the case of we're slaves right now, but we will do all that we can to keep our family together, to honor God. He's praying in the fields. Obviously, Corrie's dad was like the real pillar of her conviction for everything that she did. So it just so, I don't know, it's just so remarkable. Even, last week we were talking about the Clapham sect with Hope and with Sydney, and we were ending on this note of the generational, how the Clapham sect grew because of the generational inheritance, really of righteousness.
Yeah.
And you see that in this situation as well, that these women are carrying a righteousness and a zeal for the things of God that was passed on generationally. So it just stirs me, circuit riders, for what God would do even in our lives. I think sometimes not all of us come from families that have pursued God, but to say, God, man, give me vision now to establish a generational inheritance and to be this sort of parent that would put something like that in their kids.
Yeah, it's true.
So wild.
Yeah.
It's true. I think it's so the Lord that both of their parents were preparing them from childhood for the calls on their lives. Like, I don't think that Corrie Ten Boom knew that Jewish people would be persecuted, but he was preparing his daughters to suffer, one of them unto death, since they were children, for the Jewish people because of his convictions.
So powerful.
Goodness.
It's true. It's like, what are we asking for our families, for our future families? Like, for me, I want to set an example for my future family. I'm like one of the first believers in my whole generational line, fully sold out for Christ. So what am I going to be preparing in my heart now that my children will sacrificially love on behalf of in their lives? You know, it's like a conviction that goes down the line. Crazy.
So good. And I didn't realize this. We didn't pair these two women intentionally, but that they're both set in an environment of racism and persecution and oppression of people groups. And really, this is the one session where both of these women, none of the other women that we're talking about really are in that environment and responding. Their lives are a response to racism and oppression against a people group. But we see as they grab a hold of Jesus, as they grab a hold of the Bible, of the gospel, and that says that I'm going to lay down my life, one for a people group that they're not even of, with Corrie Ten Boom. And then in the case of Harriet, I just love the point that she could have stayed in Pennsylvania. She could have stayed there, but she said, no, this is an evil on the earth that my life will respond to. So this is so profound, and I think even in the day and age that we're in, so inspiring to say, what will we stand up for? Come on. So good.
So good.
Dang.
I should just keep talking.
Good stuff.
I would just, if I could have one adjective to describe the kind of love that these two women were living, is costly love. And I already hinted it at the beginning a little bit, but you think about 3 billion people in the world that have never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. 3 billion unreached people. I think it's in 7,000 people groups across the world, mostly in this location on the earth called the 1040 window, which is North Africa into the Middle East and into East Asia and into Southeast Asia. And I think, we glamorize it as missionaries sometimes. Oh, unreached people. And I know I do. Like, if God told me to go tomorrow, I'd be like, bye, Yaz, I'm gone. Bye, Zoe, gone. I'm out. Like, I love that. But you can glamorize it sometime and think, why don't people go? Why don't more people go? And really the reason people don't go is because it's hard. You don't realize that those 3 billion unreached people groups are in an environment where 80% of them, nearly or around 80% of them, are in extreme poverty. No wonder we in the West who love our iPhones and our Instagram and we like our money and we like our wealth don't want to go to these places because it's hard.
Yeah.
There's a real cost to it. You almost it's like Mother Teresa type thing. Like you got to put yourself in in an environment where you actually have to become like the people, and that's costly. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be this way. I want to still be able to do the things I like to do.
Wow.
It seems like they sacrificed a lot. A lot. Guys, it's so easy to glamorize going into a concentration camp. Wow, how heroic. Do you really think concentration camp down the road, you want to go there? Be honest, guys. Be honest. You can glamorize it all day. You can talk about, wow, I'd do the same thing. But there's a reason there's only one Corrie Ten Boom. It's because there is only one Corrie Ten Boom. And there's a reason there's only a couple Harriet Tubmans, specifically one. It's because there were only a few people doing what she was doing. You can't find a bunch. When it comes to costly love, you usually find a few people that really get it. And these are these ladies. So talk to us about the cost they paid and what was the cost. What are the things they sacrificed and that yes they had in their heart.
Yeah.
So good.
I would just say Corrie Ten Boom, along with her family. I mean, there's nothing that wasn't sacrificed unto their lives.
So good.
But I know that this was a resolve in her heart. She said that whenever she was faced with the first woman who asked for help, her son was on the run, her husband was missing. She came to their clock shop and asked, "Will you let me stay in your home?" And her thought was, in that moment, whatever it took, wherever it led, I will find a way to help these people. Now, in that moment, when it's just giving someone a bed to sleep in that night, do I think that she knew, oh, that means my family will die, I will suffer for years of my life? No, I don't think she knew that. But whenever you ask, like, what type of woman was she? What cost did she pay? I think she was a Christian. She was a little Christ. You know, she suffered in the same way that Christ would have suffered. She said, your future freedom is worthy of my current suffering. That's what she did. And so, and also the thing that's so unique about Corrie Ten Boom, the cost that she paid is obviously so significant, but she was surrounded, like we said, by a family that was so unique. And she spent her life with that family, even in suffering. I remember such a crazy story. Whenever she was in the first prison they were sent to, there was one day where the guards left, and the prisoners were basically playing humongous games of telephone, trying to tell their family members what was going on with them, because they all were separated, cell to cell, saying, okay, you know, good things like I'm still alive, bad things like, hey, dad is dead, like crazy things, right? And Corrie Ten Boom finally is passing along messages all day, and she gets this message from her sister. Betsy Ten Boom in cell 314 says to tell her sister that God is good.
Oh,
Come on.
oh my gosh.
Wow.
Out of everything she could say.
Gosh.
It is so significant. I think, honestly, Corrie Ten Boom is simply a Christian. Like a fully sold out Christian. She's fully engaged. She has a unique calling on her life, and she lived in one of the darkest moments in history. And I believe if we really are full believers, if we were in that moment, we would have to make a similar choice. We would have to. We would have to.
Yes.
Suffering ultimately unto death, suffering ultimately unto your life's message is forgiveness of others because what you have gone through. It's so crazy.
Gosh.
I mean, it's just, it is true Christianity. And we look at, you know what's sad? I mean, I love, and we call these superhero Christians, but you know what's sad is that there aren't millions of other Christians doing the exact, because you're so right. It's not like we need to identify this as radical Christianity and make up a new name for it. It's just Christianity. It's just what Christians do is what you're talking about.
That's
and we often talk about true Christianity in the sense of like, I believe the right things. I'm orthodox. Jesus died, rose from the dead. Those type of things, which are good. Don't get orthodoxy wrong. But we forget to talk about this word, I learned it in seminary, orthopraxy. It's what you practice. And isn't it true, guys, that when we talk about orthodoxy all the time, but how often do you hear talking about right practice, the way you live your life, what you do with what you believe? It's exactly your verse. We've concluded Christ died, therefore all died.
Yeah.
How could I not be compelled by that thing that Jesus did for me? I'm sorry. This
This
is so good.
Going off
Keep
just
going.
because it's so true. Same thing for you, Steph. Talk to us about the cost that Harriet paid.
My goodness. I mean, she was living in a time where she was essentially a fugitive. She ran away, and she could have been brutally brought back, killed, tortured, all the things.
Yeah.
And so the average human would say, I'm going to stay here where it's safe, it's comfortable, I'm not going to be re-enslaved. And for her, the cost was, will you say yes to potentially risk all that I just mentioned and being re-enslaved into such a terrible system just for the sake of possibly, hopefully, bringing a few others into freedom with you? And then there were many other moments where she had to ask herself if she was willing again.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I look at her life and those moments where she had to choose to take that risk and choose to pay the price. And I just think about this phrase like, man, God, would you find me willing? Would you find me ready? Like willing and ready. She was ready. Like she had the physical ability, and she had the knowledge of the stars and the terrain and connection with God, but was she willing to do it? And that is the game changer, is are you willing? And so I want to read this moment really quick because there was a watershed moment for both American history and for her history. So up until the Fugitive Slave Act was passed in 1850, if you came north as in above the Mason-Dixon line, so Pennsylvania and above, you were free as a slave. You couldn't be brought back even if slave catchers found you. But in 1850, America compromised hard on this issue, and they passed something called the Fugitive Slave Act, which basically made all of America open to slavery, not so much in practice, but any runaway slave found in any location could be forcibly re-enslaved.
Wow.
And so, and on top of that, owners could forcibly use any northerner that even knew of those people's locations to help them find them and bring them back. And so America was no longer safe. And so that's why all of these runaways started moving into Canada. And that also made the journey that much more treacherous, long, and difficult. Because you not only just had to get to Pennsylvania, you had to get into Canada. And the reason why was Canada was still a crown colony of the UK, and the UK had outlawed slavery thanks to Wilberforce. And so, I know, right? And so it was safe. And so, so Harriet has this moment of, okay, do I just stay in Canada? And there was this moment where someone says to her, a friend who was an abolitionist in the North, and she's worried about her sister who's still in Maryland, and says to her, okay, everything has changed since the Fugitive Slave Act passed, and it will be more dangerous than ever to go south. But if you feel you must, we will need someone to lead them from Baltimore north. Think about it tonight and tell me tomorrow if you are willing to risk your life for your sister. So you would think that, okay, I'm a runaway from this exact plantation. Do I go? People have a bounty on my head now? Like, people are looking for me. What do I do? Zero hesitation was her response. She literally says, I don't need to think about it for another moment. I have spent every hour of my freedom working and saving so I could rescue my family. Of course I will go.
Wow.
And then it wasn't just her family. It was countless others. And then you have the Civil War. And she's like, of course I'll be a scout. You know? And she just was willing because she was committed to the truth that all men were made in the image and the likeness of God. Therefore, there's incalculable value, beauty, worth, dignity on every human life. And she was motivated, so motivated. She's like, I'm not going to just sit in my little privileged position. I'm going to lay down my privilege right now. And if I perish, I perish. It's Esther. If I perish, I perish, but I will go forward and fight that masses will be set free.
Gosh, So wild. And it is so crazy, too, to think that when she went on these expeditions, I think she went on about 14 or so, that it really was only handfuls of slaves that are being free. It's not like you're freeing a whole city or a whole state. To think of how much she's risking for a handful of
like
people
5 to 10
at a time.
Yeah.
But even there, like you're saying, the value of life.
Yes.
And I just think of the grit, the hard work, like physically, you are putting everything on the line for a few people.
Yeah.
And the level of love that you must have. And even in Corrie Ten Boom's case as well, they're risking everything really for a handful. It's not like, oh, all of Germany will be saved from me risking my life. It's like a few people will be saved. But before the eyes of the Lord, this is right.
Yes.
And the value on these people's lives is worth it, even if it's a few people. And what's so remarkable about Harriet's life is that she continually said yes to that, in the case of her sister, and then eventually did lead 700 plus into freedom. But
That's so
really,
wild.
and the authority of that place of like, okay, God's entrusting this with you now. But really to say that it starts with, and it is the place of, do you value one person that much?
Yeah,
So
no, I've been so provoked reading her story because all I can think about is, okay, obviously I don't live in slavery. We don't live under Nazi Germany, but how much do I value the lives of people in front of me day in and day out who are actually in bondage that because they don't know Jesus. You know, it's like it doesn't look like life and death to us because we don't see it played out in the natural like we see in their lives, but it's the same situation. Like if we really believe the Bible, then people are dead without Christ. Like they're actually dead. It's not like, oh, I'm just living a cool fun life for myself. It's like, no, like you're dead. You're dead. And so if I have life, who am I to say like, well, it's more comfortable for me right now to maybe like pray about it.
God,
Are you kidding
so
me?
Crazy.
You know, it's like, no, you don't have life and I have life and I know the way to life. Why would I not tell you? Why would I not show you? Why would I not count my life in this age of no account so that you could have eternity too with me?
Come on.
You know?
Yes.
And so I just think about Galatians 2:20 and like you said, it's just the gospel. Like if we really have been crucified with Christ, it's no longer we who live, but Christ who lives in us. In this life we live in the body, we live by faith. And the one who loved us and gave himself for us. And then it says in 1 John 4:17 that as he was, so are we in this world. So he gave up his life. And he's like, I'm making my appeal, but I don't have hands and feet on this earth right now. It's you. So will you make my appeal through your life? Will you lay down your life because you've already found it? You're going to live forever. Will you lay down your life and say, just like Harriet, I don't need to think about it. One moment more.
Come on.
I don't even need to think about it.
Yeah.
Come
Like
on.
I have spent every hour of my life as a new creation, and I will trying to figure out how I could save souls.
Come
Of
on.
course I'll go.
Come on.
You know?
Come on. So good.
Come on. Crazy.
Dang. Amazing. Do you want to ask the next one? Or?
I'll ask the next one.
So good, Steph. Yes.
Guys, Circuit Rider, for me, because I feel the emotion of this. I hope you guys feel the emotion of this. These are the type of discussions that change me as a person. I'm being very honest before you. These are the type of things when I hear them, I get changed as a person. And I don't sit there and go, well, like, I just wish everybody else would live this way. It's like I'm sitting here for myself, sitting here thinking, man, I don't live those two ladies' lives right now. Gosh. I like preaching. I like reading my Bible. I like doing ministry stuff. I like saying I've been to different nations. I like that stuff. But that type of love is the type of love that changes the world. Not my ministry. Not me liking to do certain things. But love. Radical love. And these ladies, I'm going to ask you this next question now, were no compromise women. I mean, they would be terrifying to have as your mother. I'm certain of that.
Wow.
But there were no compromise type of women, and we steal that kind of line from Keith Green because he was a man of no compromise as well. But talk to us about that. This is their forehead of flint, that they were unwavering. And, I mean, you think of Peter. Peter denied Jesus, and he was with him for 3 years. He saw him transfigured. I mean, even the apostle Peter denied Jesus, and these women were unwavering, no compromise. Talk to us about that, Zoe.
Yeah, I think for Corrie Ten Boom, and for us as believers, living without compromise is much easier when we see the reality of the lives on the other side. So for Corrie, it was in a police station.
Wow.
The reality of the situation is there's no option where everyone goes free. There's no option where everyone gets to leave unharmed. But in her mind, I imagine she thinks about maybe helping put one of the Jewish children to sleep. She thinks about eating dinner with these Jewish people that she has gained almost family with. Right? She thinks about these moments, and she has a clear revelation of what is on the other side of her compromise. If she compromises, they will die. Right? And so I think whenever we have that revelation, and I would encourage everyone, ask God for the revelation of what is on the other side of your compromise. In Brave Love, we always learn. We always talk about the cost of saying no is far greater than the cost of saying yes, right?
Come on.
What will happen in your compromise? I think for Corrie, honestly, it was the grace of the Lord that she knew exactly what would happen if she compromised. For us, we actually might not know fully yet.
That's true.
But what will happen if I do compromise? If I choose this safer path versus what I really think God is asking me? Who's, just like you said, Steph, lives are on the other side. So whose life is on the other side, right? And ultimately, whenever we say, oh, we want to live like Christ, we want to be Christians, little Christs, what is the gospel? Your life is more, I value more than my own. Therefore, I will suffer so that you would be free. That is the gospel, right? So if we're going to say, I can self-preserve or I can live a life of no compromise, our choice is I choose the joy set before me to suffer on your behalf for not even your freedom in this moment. The Jewish people in her home had to wait out for weeks for the Nazi police to stop patrolling in the area. She didn't even know if they would escape, right? But when she was in prison, she got a note from her family member. She had a moment where she was actually able to see her family that wasn't imprisoned, and she got a note, and the only thing the note said was the clocks are safe. At the time, that meant the clocks were the hidden Jewish people. The clocks are safe. And she had so much joy. She had so much joy in her heart. She talks about that was one of the most joyous moments of my life. Not when she was freed. She was still in captivity in the very beginning of her captivity, getting ready to go to a concentration camp and then unto a death camp. And her highest joy was, oh, good, I have something to suffer for. The clocks are safe. Isn't that crazy? So what is on the side of your no compromise? I would ask, can we ask Jesus, what is it? You know? Who are the people? Ask him to show you their faces. Ask him to show you their names, the people groups, that you would be willing to live a life of no compromise for. Because when you have that clear vision, then it's much easier. You know?
Gosh, that's amazing.
You know what I mean? You see the
So
6 Jewish lives that will end if you compromise. You know, what are the lives for you?
So good.
You know what I'm saying?
So huge. 100%.
It's so crazy.
So good.
So
I
good.
think so. Yeah.
Go ahead, Steph. Tell us.
Oh my goodness. I'm just so provoked by your question. What is on the other side of our yes to say no compromise? Drawing that line in the sand. God, tell us. Teach us, Jesus. My goodness. I think it's so true. I think that for both of these women, it was very obvious. They're living in basically a war zone. It's obvious what's on the other side of their yes to self-preserve or to walk out no compromise, which is radical sacrificial love. And for us, I think the Lord, through this conversation, honestly, is just bringing us into this realization, you're in a war zone too. You're in a fight for your generation to come into freedom. You're in a fight for the nations to know Jesus and be given to him as Jesus' inheritance. Come, it looks not like that, but it is. And we just need to have that realization.
No matter the circumstance, it is life and death. No matter the time in history, it's always going to be life and death. You know?
So good.
So
and
crazy.
I think what marked Harriet with the aspect of no compromise was either you go forward or you die. And she actually said that to someone. A lot of times, some of the slaves would get a little spooked on the journey because it was terrifying. And you had slave catchers coming after you with dogs, and they'd all seen people that had tried to make a run for it and then got caught, brought back, had their ears chopped off, like just brutal retribution for trying to run away. And so there was a real fear of what will happen to me if I go. And one of them said, better the devil that you know than the devil that you don't, And so she would say to them, no, go on or die. Like, if you don't move forward even into the unknown, and you're willing to choose to stay, then you'll die. But then also she had that same internal compass inside of her, which is either I keep going on expeditions to bring people into freedom, or they're gonna die. And either the nation, and she became really good friends with some prominent abolitionists like Frederick Douglass and William Seward, and just authors and people of influence in that day and age. They were so moved by her life. And even for them, they realized that America was being brought to a moment of decision of either you move forward into righteousness and letting all your slaves go free, or the nation will die. And when many people were saying we're not going to have a civil war, even Lincoln was like, I'm not going to push the South to release their slaves, like all of these things. She was like, if we don't address this issue and we don't deal with abolition, America will have a war, and it will be the war to decide, like, will we have slaves or will we not? And so she knew that it's like we have to move forward out of every form of compromise on the issue of life. That life matters to God, that humanness is of a high value to the Lord, and that He would do whatever it took to liberate like those that He created.
And that's why, I mean, you come from a lot of different backgrounds as far as ministry backgrounds, one specifically the call. And I mean, I always think when you say stuff like you just said, I just think that's why we honor someone like Lou Engle, who's fought especially on the subject of abortion. And it's such a, I mean, you just gotta, I mean, if we're talking about slavery this way, and obviously, we still have racial reconciliation to talk about in America, no doubt about that. But not to switch subjects, but just on the subject of abortion, how in the same way you're talking about it when it comes to slavery, it's the same. And so we just honor you, Steph, number one, because you've prayed many hours into the ending of abortion in America, and so has Lou Engle, and so as the circuit riders, we honor those who have fought that fight, because that's not an easy fight to fight in any way, shape, or form. Just like it was not easy for Harriet anyway. So
dang, that's so good. Come on, so good. I mean, we could just keep diving more and more. I just have one more question to ask you, ladies. But we'll see just anything else that the Lord would bring up. But one more question, just we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but the reality for us today. So we're looking at these women's lives. And the reality for us today is we're not under a Nazi regime. We're not in a time of actual slavery. There is slavery in so many ways, but we live in a very different world where we're not necessarily oppressed in these same ways. And to what Derek mentioned before, sometimes we can kind of romanticize, glamorize. Man, if I lived in that time, I would be right there with Corrie Ten Boom. I'd be with Harriet Tubman, which, yes, I believe that. Or even the civil rights time, saying, I'd be marching with Martin Luther King Jr. But the reality is, what does this look like for us today? Because the reality in both of their lives is they lived with self-sacrificial love for others. So for us today, what does that same love look like? What would you say to us as a circuit rider community, others across America, across the world, our generation, how to step into that same value of sacrificial love?
Do you want to take it?
Sure. Okay. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is Romans 6, and it's kind of intense, but it's where Paul says, like, reckon yourselves dead. Like, it's not your life, and you're not living for yourself anymore. Like, we as circuit riders, we as just everyday believers, whether you're a missionary or not, like, our lives really are not our own. And I think that sometimes in America, it can be really tempting to still hold on to our life, because everything about our culture tells us that we need to live our best life now, and that we're living for our dreams, our visions, our purposes. It's just self all day. And yet the gospel is the self profits nothing. Like, the flesh profits nothing. That it's all about laying down our lives. Those who seek their lives lose it. Those who lose their lives for Christ's sake find it. And then we're charged in the writings of Paul to reckon ourselves dead and to not live for ourselves so that others might live.
Yeah.
Come on.
You know, so that God could receive fullness of glory. And I think that we understand that in like you were saying, the orthodoxy sense, like the big picture, theological. I believe that, yes.
Yeah.
But then when it comes down to day in, day out decisions, like, do we really have a yielded heart where it's like, I don't make decisions without checking in with Jesus? Or if he tells me not to do something, do I consider that an option, a suggestion, or is that like a command from not just my best friend, because obviously God's our best friend, he's our father, he's the lover of our souls, but he's also Lord. Like, he's Lord of heaven and earth. And so it's not just you exist to give me eternal life, it's I exist for your glory. So my life belongs to you, and what you say goes. And so it might sound trivial, but like, if you wanted to go to the donuttery and God said no, would you not go? Can God trust you to not go?
Yeah,
you know? Like, if he can't trust you to not go, he's not going to trust you to fill a stadium, regardless of the prophetic word over your life. You know what I mean? And so I just believe that God is inviting us to actually live out
That's right.
what he's called us into. And he is still seeking to destroy the works of the devil, to seek and to save that which was lost, and to establish his kingdom, advance his kingdom through our little lives.
So good.
And
I love that.
I think with Harriet, like, she lived a poured out life. There was never a moment where she was like, okay, have I done enough yet? Like, am I like, can I take a vacation from living a life laid down? Or I'm tired, like, I'm going to take a break, and then I'll seek to lay down my life later. Like, she was consumed. And I think the invitation is to have a burning heart of love, so that we're just as consumed for the cause of Christ in our generation. It might not be fighting Nazis or fighting slavery, but there is a cause of Christ in our generation. There's a cause of Christ in every generation. And so the greatest, and I would say the most unselfish thing we could do, is to ask God, what is the cause of Christ? What is your cause in my generation? And how can I throw myself fully into it?
So good.
And seek to see you exalted and your name known, regardless of what it might cost me. And then the last thing I would say is there's this man named Count Zinzendorf that some of you may have heard of before. He was one of the leaders of the Moravian movement, and the Moravians were a group of believers in Germany, radically loved the Lord. They were persecuted, it's a whole story, but they were incredible people. And they were so gripped by the love of God that they went everywhere to preach the gospel. And
really the first modern, kind of the precursor to the modern missions movement.
And they were motivated by love for one another, love for God. They started a 100-year prayer meeting. Basically just prayed round the clock for 100 years, which is incredible. But Count Zinzendorf has this incredible statement that he makes. And at the very end of it, he says, preach the gospel, die and be forgotten. I'm going to say that again. Preach the gospel, die and be forgotten. And I feel like so many in our generation, because of Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, like YouTube channels, and even just famous Christians, we're like, I'm going to become famous for my works for God. But what if the Lord is inviting us to embrace a life where even if no one knows, or no one thinks it's awesome, or no one thinks it's cool, I am going to just be faithful, and I'm going to lay down my life, and I'm going to preach the gospel. And if I die and I'm completely forgotten, I am memorialized in heaven. Like, where are we putting our worth and our treasure? Is it here or is it there? Because it will burn in this age. It won't. We're not taking it to heaven with us. The only type of eternity that doesn't vanish is the only type of notoriety that doesn't vanish is notoriety before God. And with Harriet, one of her friends, Frederick Douglass, wrote a letter to her towards the end of her life, and he touches on that same thing. And it was she was known by a lot of people, but no one really knew what she suffered. No one knew the internal struggles. No one knew the choices that she had to make day in and day out. They just saw the fruit.
Yeah.
But she lived all of it that produced the crazy fruit.
Yes.
And he said this to her. He said, I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved by the multitude, while most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondmen and women, whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt God bless you has been your only reward. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witness of your devotion to freedom and of your heroism.
That is powerful.
Crazy.
Gosh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Reckon yourselves dead.
I had to let Steph go first because I knew she had fire. I knew she had it. I would just say super practically, the Lord is really kind to prepare us for like being a self-sacrificer. And he prepares us in small ways that lead to big ways. And if you look at Corrie's life, if you look at Harriet's life, if you look at Jesus's life, Jesus was prepared for the greatest sacrifice in history, right? Like he spent years in preparation. And so I would just say momentous sacrifice, which is what we all want to have, the whether it's known or unknown, we want to have that type of meaningful life, right?
Yeah.
And so would we be willing today to take those steps of preparation for those moments that are going to be remembered in heaven, on earth, you know, all those things.
Wow.
And so I would say wherever you personally are today, whether it's for the first time ever sharing that you are a believer with a family that might not understand, whether it's, is it Hudson Taylor that got on a boat and just like never saw his family again?
That's a lot of missionaries.
Okay. But it was him and his brother?
Well, I think you're specifically thinking of Adoniram Judson, but
Okay.
they did similar things.
Yeah, okay. Or it's that, right? Or it's saying, okay, I'm never going to see my family again. That's my sacrifice for today because God has prepared you for years, right? Yeah. So whatever step you're taking of self-sacrifice today, simply just take it. Yeah. You know? And whether your ultimate sacrifice, you don't know what it is. It could be a public ministry where you're I wouldn't say persecuted, but misunderstood a lot. It could be that where you're preaching in front of stadiums and you're an evangelist that everyone remembers for centuries and centuries. Or it could be that you are obedient unto death and no one ever knows your name, right? But you're being prepared for something. Yeah. So would you take the step today to walk into greater preparedness for a moment like the moments in Corrie's life, like the moments in Harriet's life, like the moments in Jesus's life, right? Yeah. There's no greater sacrifice than the love of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah. So just practically prepare. And whatever the Lord says today, do today. So that whatever the Lord says tomorrow, you can do tomorrow.
Yes. That's so good.
Simple.
So good.
Yeah.
I want to, you kind of had it written down here, but Chloe mentioned a story to me about Corrie Ten Boom's life because after she got freed, right, she became this kind of international speaker. And I mean, you guys can comment on the story. It always gets me every time. I mean, it's just the most wild story. I think it summarizes what we're talking about, the sacrificial love. Yeah. Because once again, we were trying to hammer this in. We glamorize sacrificial love.
Right.
Yes.
We glamorize it because people who sacrifice a lot get known. Not all of them, but they get known in some way, shape, or form. That's throughout human history, the people that are known are the people that have sacrificed the most in whatever area it is that they're known for. It's because they sacrificed. And so when we're thinking of sacrificial love, it's easy to glamorize it like they've been talking about. But in the moment of the intensity of a situation where you have to choose what to do, you have to be integral to the call of the gospel. What will you do in that moment? I haven't had a moment like Corrie Ten Boom had, but I have to share this story. So she was preaching, and she talked about forgiveness, and she basically what she says is people were responding in some way, shape, or form, and then all of a sudden she saw this man. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to touch on this at all. You can. Do you want to share it?
You can go for it.
Why don't
I'll share.
you share?
I'll share. So
You
yeah,
have to share it. Just it summarizes everything.
It really does put it all into
It
perspective.
summarizes the verse, love your enemy.
It's true. So she's preaching at a church. Her message after she was released is the message of forgiveness for your enemies, Christ's forgiveness, ultimately. And she was in the crowd and she sees this man that's fairly taller than everyone else. And she immediately is flashed back to her time at Ravensbrück. And she has a flashback of this very man that's standing in the church in front of her, ordering, this is intense, but ordering women to undress and watching them as they're undressing. And he's a guard of Ravensbrück who had done wild things that she witnessed in her life. And she sees him in the crowd standing there. Mm-hmm. And she has this flashback. And she's struck. And after her message, people, like we see all the time, people come up and thank her and say, wow, that was so incredible. This is how it applied to my life. So awesome. And this man, she sees him approaching her. And he walks up to her and he doesn't say anything of like, I was a guard, I did these terrible things. There's no bit of like, I'm so repentant. I'm assuming he's a believer at this point. It reflects that he is. He doesn't say anything crazy of like, I can't believe what I've done to people. He simply says like, thank you so much. Yeah. And he reaches out his
good message.
Yeah.
Fräulein. That's what he says to her. Good message.
Yeah, great. Good message, Fräulein. Reaches out his hand to her. And in that moment, she says, Lord, please help me live my message. And she feels paralyzed. She's like, I do not want to shake his hand. I know what he has done in his life. And she says, like, the Holy Spirit literally comes over her and like supernaturally, she's like, boom. Yeah. And the moment she shakes his hand, she says she feels forgiveness, like wash over her. Wow. It's such a wild story.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things you mentioned there about the story is the guy is so glib. He just is like, it's like no big deal, and he asks her, I was at this place. Would you forgive me? And this guard was specific. He didn't kill her sister Betsy, but he was watching her, overseeing her while she did die, and asked, will you forgive me? And it's just so funny. It's so easy to talk about forgiveness in our generation. Do we not think all here that forgiveness is not the key? Yeah. Forgiveness is not the key to racial reconciliation. I have to say it, guys. I'm so sorry. Forgiveness is not the key to your father and what your father did to you, or what your mom did to you, or what the people in your ministry have done to you. And is forgiveness not the key? It's easy for us to sit here and talk about it. And then the Nazi man who is basically killing these Jewish women, and he's like, will you forgive me?
That's right.
Boom. Hand on, exactly what you said. Liquid love comes over her, and she said in the moment in her mind, forgiveness is not an emotion, and stuck her hand out. Yes. And then she feels the forgiveness towards this man, and it is exactly what we're talking about.
It's true. It's so crazy. She reaches out her hand first before she feels like she can forgive him. Yeah. Like, what does that even show? Yeah. That she reaches out her hand first, trusting that whenever she touches his hand, she'll be able to forgive. Yeah. Yes. Wow. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And
so wild.
Is this not the type of love that the world is waiting to see?
It's true. That's right.
Just that type of radical demonstration of the cross of Jesus Christ. Remember, people see that there aren't just these letters in the New Testament, these epistles, but Paul literally says that your life is an epistle. Yes. Your life is an epistle. Your life, my life is an epistle. What do they see of Jesus Christ? What do they see written about him on our lives as believers? Even in circuit riders, we can take our foot off the gas of sacrificial love. And any ministry, you can do it. It summarizes it so perfectly. This sacrificial love of living your message to the T. Harriet Tubman and Corrie Ten Boom. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
I think this was so good.
It was so
powerful. I think the last thing I would say, even on that question, just about that we're in a different generation. Yeah. I just think it just boils down to also, we've talked about so many different things of how to live this out practically, but so much of what we hit to was just simply seeing the reality that those who don't know Christ are dead. Yeah. And that would we lay down our lives to lift up the name of Jesus, that the lost would know him. And Romans 10, it says, how how will they know?
Yes.
Unless someone
tells
preaches
them.
to
Yeah.
them, unless someone declares the gospel. And I think that is a very simple, practical. I love everything we said about simple obedience, day in, day out preparation. And I think this was the charge, is the Bible. It's saying obey, love me, reach the lost, because they are dying, and gain a heart of compassion that Jesus had, a heart of love that's willing to sacrifice that they would be saved.
Yeah.
So, obviously we can all just go off on that, but just the simplicity of living for the gospel and living for people's salvation. It's not a Christian duty. It's not an obligation.
Yes.
It is the heart of Jesus.
That's
and to
right.
press into Jesus to gain that true heart of compassion and sacrificial love. Even to, like we're saying with Harriet, really both of them, one person is that valuable.
Yep.
A handful, just
Yes.
a few. I'm willing to sacrifice that just a few would know Jesus.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you, ladies. We are
Thank you.
undone.
Yes,
This
come
was
on.
so powerful. I bet so many people cried during this talk.
I cried.
Wow, so good.
Yeah, there's nothing else to say. We'll see you guys next week, other than
Yeah.
I'm going to go home and have to do business with God about how I love people and how I love the world. It's so true, isn't it? It's just like you
Yes.
read these lives and you're like, frick, I'm not a very loving person yet. I got a long way to go.
Goodness.
We love you guys. We'll see you next Sunday. One more week to go on the Hallelujah Lassies. Thank you
Yes.
guys.
Awesome. See you
Boom.
guys.